The first thing to know about the Fiscal Wake-Up Tour is that it's not just about numbers. The federal budget is about $4 trillion. That's a number. But it's basically about our national priorities and what we think of our future, our collective future. Because the decisions that we make today or fail to make will have a lot to do with the challenges and opportunities that future generations are going to face 20 or 30 years from now. Today, the main focus in Washington is understandably on the recession and the frozen credit markets, the very high budget deficit, and what to do about it. But it's important to remember that even before these current problems, the budget was already on an unsustainable track. We have to look at the magnitude of the long-term problem and understand the need for making some critical trade-offs and the importance of acting sooner rather than later. You know, traditionally, budget deficits have been caused by things like recessions and war, and obviously those factors are in play now. Those factors tend to recede, and then the budget has gone back to some sort of more normal level. But this time there's a big difference, and it's that big difference which is motivating the Fiscal Wake-Up Tour. You see, when the recession fades now and the war costs go away and the budget deficit shrinks, we're going to be smack dab in the middle of the baby boomers' retirement years. And that's going to put a lot of pressure on the budget as the baby boomers begin to collect Social Security and Medicare. This is a fiscal pressure that we haven't faced before. Let's look at where the federal budget is today. This year, we're projecting a federal budget deficit of somewhere around $1.7 to $1.8 trillion. That is by far and away a record no matter how you look at it. When you run big budget deficits, obviously you rack up big debts, and we have been doing that. That's not a surprise. I think what is a surprise to some people is the amount of debt that we're borrowing from abroad. Well, Americans have been saving less, and because we've been borrowing more, the amount of our debt held by foreign lenders is now up over 50%. Now, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it does create a vulnerability for our economy. And it does mean that it's a growing mortgage, really, on our future national income, because the benefits of that investment that foreigners are making in this country will flow abroad rather than back here for Americans. Another part about running big budget deficits is that you have to pay for them. That is, you have to pay interest. Just like American consumers run up bills on their credit cards and have to pay interest, so does the federal government. And that interest cost was $170 billion last year. But if we keep borrowing at these rates over the next 10 years, that interest bill is going to spike. And so recently, the analysis at the Congressional Budget Office showed that interest on the national debt could grow to around $800 billion within the next 10 years. Now, that would be more than we spend on national defense. It would be about 16% of the budget. So we can't assume that deficits don't matter. If you think deficits don't matter, think about an interest bill being more than we pay on national defense. And keep in mind also that right now the federal government is able to borrow huge sums of money at a very low interest rate because of the slow economy. But as the economy picks up, interest rates will rise. And so rolling over this huge debt that we're running up now is going to have to be done at higher interest rates. And that's one of the reasons that interest costs are going to go up very much over the next 10 years. On the Fiscal Wake-Up Tour, we talk a lot about the concept of stewardship. Now, stewardship is a word that isn't usually associated with the federal budget, and some people don't even use the word at all. But really what it means is watching out for the future and trying to preserve and protect the future. And we think that that concept needs to be applied more often to the federal budget. So it's really important when we think about the federal budget to think not just of the present. Think about a couple of basic facts here. Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid already comprise about 42% of the federal budget. Now, that's before the boomers have begun to retire in any big numbers. Then look at the dynamics affecting those programs. First, there's demographics. Over the next 25 years, the number of people in the population age 65 and over is going to go from about 13% to about 20%. Now, you can understand that alone is going to put a lot of pressure on those programs and on the federal budget. But demographics is far from the only problem. We also have rising health care costs. They tend to grow faster than the economy, faster than incomes, And if you look at how fast they've grown over the past 40 years and project forward and say, what if that trend continues over the next 40 years? Well, you'd find that Medicare and Medicaid would consume about as much of our nation's resources as the entire federal budget does today. Well, that's an unsustainable trend. It would certainly put enormous pressure on the rest of the budget. It would certainly squeeze out other programs, put a lot of pressure on taxes. And so we know that that's an unsustainable trend and something is going to have to be done about it. So what do we do? Well, it's really important that however we address the budget pressures in the future, the American people need to be involved because it's going to involve some very hard choices about programs that people care about, Medicare, Social Security, Medicaid, and everybody cares about their tax bill. These issues are going to have to be discussed, and it's important that the American people not be left out of the discussion. And that's where the Fiscal Wake-Up Tour comes in. We like to think of ourselves not as gloom and doom, but as more like Paul Revere, spreading an alarm. Paul Revere didn't ride through town saying the British are coming, get the heck out of town. He said, let's do something about it. And they rallied the Minutemen. Well, economically speaking, that's what we need to do now. We need to get our folks together at town hall meetings and on the battle green, so to speak, of public policy and figure out what we want to do about these issues so that we can leave a better nation for our children and grandchildren. Members of the Fiscal Wake-Up Tour, in our Paul Revere role, do not pretend that we agree on all these issues. In fact, we don't agree on the best level of spending, taxes, and debt, but we all agree that the current policies of our nation are unsustainable. This is not a matter of ideology, it's a matter of arithmetic. We also agree that there are no easy answers here. Everybody wants to cut waste, fraud, and abuse from the federal budget, and we should do that. But frankly, there isn't enough waste, fraud, and abuse in the federal budget to solve these future problems. Everybody wants to grow the economy. We should grow the economy. And a strong economy would certainly help us pay for these costs off in the future. But we can't kid ourselves that we're going to be able to grow our way out of these problems. Frankly, they're just too big. We all agree that it is very important for there to be bipartisan solutions. These problems are too big for any one party to tackle on their own. Frankly, I don't think politically either party would want to tackle them on their own. It really requires the sort of trade-offs that a bipartisan solution requires. And we all agree that public engagement is very, very important. As I said before, the public needs to be involved in this discussion and a part of it. Finally, we all agree that this is not just about numbers. The numbers are important. You do want to understand the numbers, obviously. But the numbers tell a story, and the story is really about people. It's about the future of our country and the opportunities that future generations are going to have, or the challenges that we're going to pass on to them. Now, my parents' generation left a terrific country for me and my sister, and I feel that it's our generation, the baby boomers' duty, to leave an even stronger country with even better possibilities for future generations. But right now, we're not doing that. So whatever we decide to do, however we decide to address this, liberal, conservative, Democrat, Republican, it doesn't really matter. What matters is that we find solutions that will leave our children and grandchildren better off and on a better track than we're at today.